Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Traceability at the Farm Level of the Leather Supply Chain. Today's presentation will be translated into Portuguese. Please select English or Portuguese in the translation box on the webinar doc. Today's presentation will be recorded in English and sent out to all registered participants and also will be posted on the Hub. We will have a Q&A portion throughout the presentation. You can type your questions into the question box on the webinar doc. Any unanswered questions will be answered afterward via email. Now on to Nicole with Textile Exchange. Nicole?
Thank you, Rose. Thank you. And hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Lambert, and it is a real pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of Textile Exchange and the Responsible Leather Roundtable to this joint webinar with the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and the Brazilian Roundtable for Sustainable Livestock. So just before we start, I'd like to run you through our Antitrust Statement. Textile Exchange convenes the textile community and values a diversity of views, expertise, opinions, backgrounds, and experiences. It is expected that members of this community will collaborate by sharing ideas, information, and resources of publicly available information only, and avoid discussions on price, strategic plans, or other private and sensitive information. I'll also let you read through our disclaimer, but basically the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this webinar belong solely to the speakers. And as the leader of the Responsible Leather Roundtable, Textile Exchange strives to maintain a neutral role. Just some very quick house rules that Rose mentioned. You are all put on mute. This webinar is recorded and the presentation and recording will be made available for you. If you do have any questions, do not hesitate, and please use the Q&A option in your Zoom toolbar. As Rose was mentioning, today we will have translation. We have some presenters that will be presenting in Portuguese. So we'll have some simultaneous translation in English and in Portuguese, so for the Portuguese speakers as well. So if you are an English speaker, please select English. If you are a Portuguese speaker, please select the Portuguese option. And to avoid any confusion, I'd also recommend that you mute the original audio. As I know that today's audience is a little broader than usual and may include some people new to Textile Exchange, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you to Textile Exchange. So Textile Exchange is a nonprofit that was founded in 2002. Our work focuses on the sustainability of fibers and materials used by the textile industry. And our mission is really to inspire and equip people to accelerate the adoption of preferred materials in the textile value chain. So we focus on carbon reduction, soil health, water, biodiversity, but also animal welfare, as a part of a real holistic approach to driving positive impact for the industry. Our vision is pretty ambitious. We have the vision of a global textile industry that protects and restores the environment while enhancing lives. And so what we do is to provide the sector with learning opportunities, such as today with our learning series, but also tools such as our Leather Impact Accelerator, insights, standards, data, measurement, and benchmarking, and beyond all, by building a community, because we really believe that the impact, in a real impact of collaboration and collective action. So this brings me to the work we have been carrying out on bovine leather, and which was first initiated by brands asking for some solution to tackle sustainability risks at the farm level, and in particular animal welfare and deforestation at first. So in the very early days of the work on this topic, we realized one fundamental issue, and that was that cattle producers do not produce cows for their hides. Nowadays, farmers receive nothing or very little value for the hides they the hides of the animals they raise, basically. So this meant that brands using leather had no real leverage on these producers to make the changes they want to see happen at the farm level. So that meant that the only way we, Textile Exchange, could start to engage with cattle producers was by connecting with the beef industry and finding synergies with the beef industry to work towards improved practices at the farm level, and also finding a way to reward the farmers that were enforcing improved practices. So Textile Exchange found a great partner to do this with, and that was the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, GRSB, with whom we have worked very closely in the development of our Leather Impact Accelerator and also the Leather Impact Incentives. We even actually have a Textile Exchange employee who works part-time for us and part-time for GRSB, and that's Josefine Aisel, whom you may have heard during our first webinar. And so we're just very happy to have this joint webinar with GRSB and GTPS, and both organizations will be presented to you very shortly. Today's webinar, as I was saying, is the fourth of a series of 5 webinars on traceability in the leather supply chain. In our previous webinars, we've heard the importance and the growing demand from brands for more traceability in the leather supply chain. We've also heard that this topic is being addressed by international organizations such as the UNEC, but also being seriously addressed by standards used in the leather supply chain. And finally, during our last webinar, we also heard that there are companies that are developing and providing solutions to help brands and suppliers of the leather supply chain carry out supply chain mapping and traceability and implement traceability systems in their supply chain. Today's webinar is a deeper dive into traceability at the farm level, and more specifically in Brazil. The objective of the webinar is really to provide you with an understanding of the current legal requirements for livestock traceability in Brazil and how it is expected to evolve. In addition, we have the National Wildlife Federation and JBS, sorry, that are also going to provide us with their perspective on traceability in Brazil and give us an overview of the solutions they've adopted to address this topic. I'd just like now to introduce you to our brilliant panel of speakers for today. We have Luisa Bruscato, who is the Executive Manager of JTPS, Simon Hall, a Senior Manager at NWF, so the National Wildlife Federation, Kim Senna, who is Sustainability Manager at JBS Leather, and finally, Paulo Costa, who is the Coordinator of the Traceability Protocols at CNN, which is the Brazilian Agriculture and Livestock Confederation. So our agenda today is we'll start off with Luisa, who will give us an overview of the Brazilian cattle sector to give some perspective to the rest of this webinar. Then Paulo will continue and dig into the current legal status of traceability of cattle production in Brazil. Simon will then give us some perspective from an on-the-ground environmental NGO on the status of traceability in Brazil, but also provide us with some insights on the work they have been doing to address the topic. And our last speaker will be Kim from JBS, who will give us this perspective of a private company on traceability in Brazil, and give us some insight onto what the challenges have been for them, what solution they have found, and to tackle traceability in Brazil. And as Rose was mentioning at the very beginning, we will also have some time for some Q&As. And talking about that, do not hesitate to just put in your questions throughout the webinar. You can put them in English or Portuguese, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. Sorry. So our first speaker up for today is Luisa, who is the Executive Manager for JTPS. Her work focuses on the adoption of improved practices for sustainable livestock production. And prior to GTPS, she worked at BAS, where she focused on educational projects for sustainable livestock for agricultural cooperatives. Sorry for that. So Luisa, I'll let you unmute yourself and take over.
Olá a todos, bom dia. Obrigada, Nicole, pela oportunidade, pelo convite de estarmos juntos aí à Textile Exchange e ao GRSB. O GTPS é a Mesa Brasileira de Pecuária Sustentável. Pode passar o slide, por favor. Nós fomos a primeira mesa a discutir pecuária sustentável no Brasil e no mundo, na verdade. Nós somos a primeira mesa e inspiramos outras iniciativas como a nossa, como o GRSB, que nasceu posteriormente a nós. Nós temos a missão do desenvolvimento sustentável ao longo da cadeia produtiva, através da articulação da cadeia, disseminação da informação e os pilares econômico, social e ambiental. Nós somos formados pelos 6 elos da cadeia, desde produtores, insumos, pode passar para o próximo, produtores, insumos e serviços, indústria, varejo e restaurante, bancos e sociedade civil. Atualmente, nós temos 54 associados, pode passar para o próximo. Aqui são alguns das empresas e organizações que fazem parte. Inclusive, hoje, as 13 organizações que vão apresentar fazem parte do GTPS, que é a CNA, a JBS e a NWF. Pode passar para o próximo. O GTPS tem 13 anos de história e, ao longo desse tempo, a gente desenvolveu algumas ferramentas de apoio à jornada da sustentabilidade na cadeia produtiva e, atualmente, a gente está trabalhando através de 6 grupos de trabalho, que são eles a revisão dos indicadores de pecuária sustentável, estamos discutindo o tema de pagamentos por serviços ambientais, estamos discutindo rastreabilidade, que é um dos tópicos e por isso que a gente está aqui hoje, bem-estar animal, balanço de emissões de gases do efeito estufa e mudança do uso da terra. Então, esses são os 6 tópicos que a gente está discutindo dentro do GTPS e entre nossos associados. Aí eu vou falar um pouquinho sobre como está o setor da pecuária bovina de corte no Brasil. Próximo. Então, o setor de pecuária bovina de corte é um setor muito importante para o Brasil. Atualmente, ele representa 8,5% do nosso PIB. Então, é um valor bem relevante para o PIB brasileiro. A gente tem cerca de 213 milhões de cabeça de gado comercial. Temos uma área de pastagem de cerca de 162 milhões de hectares e um consumo per capita de 39 quilos por habitante por ano interno. Pode passar. A gente abate cerca de 43 milhões de cabeças, quer dizer, esse é o número de 2019, em 2019 a gente abateu 43 milhões de cabeças e tivemos um aumento de 12% nas exportações, inclusive, e 3,9% representou 3,9% de todas as exportações do Brasil. Atualmente, a gente exporta cerca de 23, 24% de toda a nossa produção e 76% fica para consumo nacional de carne, de carne bovina. Pode passar. A gente tem o maior rebanho comercial do mundo, nós somos o primeiro maior rebanho comercial do mundo e também o primeiro em exportação de carne bovina de corte, mas a gente é o segundo em produção. Hoje a gente exporta principalmente para a China, Hong Kong e Europa. Pode passar. Falando um pouquinho sobre couro, nós tivemos uma exportação em 2020, esse aqui já são dados de 2020, a gente teve uma exportação de 976 milhões de dólares, tivemos uma queda em comparação a 2019 e em 2020, porém em 2021 a gente já teve um aumento nas exportações de couro. Nós somos o terceiro maior exportador e o segundo maior exportador para a China. Então, nossos maiores mercados são China, Estados Unidos e Itália. São para esses países que a gente exporta a maior parte do nosso couro. Pode passar? Aqui são alguns estados produtores brasileiros. Então, a gente tem 244 unidades de produção e são 4 estados brasileiros mais importantes na produção de couro. Pode passar? A gente tem hoje cerca de 2,55 milhões de fazendas produtoras de carne bovina de corte no Brasil, e aí dessas, 90%, como vocês podem ver, 90% possui até 200 hectares, ou seja, a gente tem uma grande quantidade de fazendas de tamanhos menores, né, até 200 hectares. Pode passar para o próximo. E esse é um dos desafios aí da pecuária, de levar a pecuária à sustentabilidade para esses produtores. Pode passar. Falando sobre pastagem, a gente tem cerca de 134 milhões de hectares em pasto em boas condições, mas a gente tem um desafio aí de cerca de 15 milhões de hectares que precisam de recuperação ou que já estão em processo de degradação e necessitam ser recuperados. E outros 15 milhões de hectares que são de integração lavoura-pecuária. Também esses números são todos aproximados, aí tem as fontes em todos os slides. Pode passar para o próximo, por favor. Next, please. Pode passar mais 2 slides, por favor. Aqui é só para representar como está distribuído o nosso gado e a pastagem. Pode ir para o próximo. E aí, falando sobre sustentabilidade, a maior parte do gado brasileiro é criado a pasto, e aí 86% são abatidos diretamente do pasto para o abatedouro, e apenas 14% passa por confinamento. A gente tem aí um aumento de produtividade bem interessante nos últimos 10 anos, e também um decrescimento no abate de machos, de bovino de corte machos, com acima de 40 meses, ou seja, o que também demonstra um aumento de produtividade. Pode passar. Para o próximo. A gente tem cerca de 60% a 67% de área preservada. Então, de todo o território nacional brasileiro, a gente tem cerca de 60% a 67%, esse número varia de acordo com a fonte. Então, a gente tem tudo isso de área de preservação natural, preservação permanente ou reserva legal dentro do nosso território. Pode passar para o próximo, aí eu vou falar só sobre o slide de sustentabilidade, trazendo um pouco, traçando os desafios. A gente tem um desafio, pode passar. A gente tem um desafio de sustentabilidade com relação à implementação do Código Florestal brasileiro. A gente tem as leis rigorosas, porém ainda tem essa dificuldade na implementação. Pode mudar de slide, por favor, para o de sustentabilidade. Mais um. Next. Isso. E aí a gente tem uma série de desafios na implementação do CAR, que é o Cadastro Ambiental Rural, e do Programa de Regularização Ambiental. A gente também tem um desafio de compensar os produtores rurais por todas essas reservas que eles estão cuidando dentro das suas fazendas, das suas propriedades. Também temos um desafio de pacificar a ocupação do território e combater a ocupação ilegal e o desmatamento ilegal dentro do Brasil. Pode passar para o próximo. E aí um desafio que a gente entende como GTPS que integra todas essas ações é sobre o balanço de carbono e de emissões no território e na produção pecuária. A gente acredita que há muitos ganhos possíveis dentro desse aspecto. E era isso que eu queria dizer. Por favor, visitem nosso site, gtps.org.br. Também está traduzido para inglês e espanhol. Obrigada.
Thank you so much, Luisa. That was fantastic. And I know we didn't give you much time to present, so it was a bit of a rush, but everyone, these slides will be available online, as we mentioned. So our next speaker up is Paulo. He is the coordinator of traceability for the Brazilian Agriculture and Livestock Confederation, CNA. He is a trained veterinary specialized in animal production. And prior to his work at CNA, he worked for the Ministry of Fish and Aquaculture in Brazil. So Paulo, I'll let you take on from here.
Olá, espero que todos estejam bem, com suas famílias seguras, e gostaria primeiramente de agradecer a oportunidade à Text to Exchange de apresentar um pouco do nosso trabalho. Eu vou falar um pouco sobre o status da rastreabilidade no Brasil, mas antes eu gostaria de apresentar um vídeo institucional para que todos possam conhecer melhor o que a CNA realiza.
O sistema CNA representa mais de 2 milhões de produtores rurais em todo o país. É formado pela Confederação da Agricultura e Pecuária do Brasil, Serviço Nacional de Aprendizagem Rural, Senar, e Instituto CNA. A representatividade vem das 27 federações nos estados e dos quase 2.000 sindicatos rurais nos municípios. Os sindicatos elegem as diretorias das federações, e as federações elegem a diretoria da confederação. Na CNA, em Brasília, o foco é a defesa do produtor rural. A diretoria desenvolve ações e projetos para que o homem do campo possa produzir mais, com qualidade e de forma sustentável. E tem o apoio de uma estrutura de técnicos de alto nível, especializados nos diversos temas do agro. Mas o trabalho do sistema vai muito além. Contribui para o crescimento do setor com educação e assistência técnica. Essa é a missão do Senar, que também está presente em todo o país e já atendeu mais de 75 milhões de brasileiros. Em sintonia com o produtor, oferece cursos de formação profissional, atividades de promoção social, ensino técnico de nível médio, presencial e à distância. E ainda desenvolve um modelo inovador de assistência técnica e gerencial, importante para que o Brasil vença o desafio das mudanças climáticas. O sistema CNA-Senar se complementa com o Instituto CNA, que realiza estudos, pesquisas e projetos para facilitar a vida do produtor. É o caso do Observatório da Criminalidade no Campo e da Plataforma de Qualidade CNA, parceria com a Embrapa e as associações de raças bovinas. O sistema CNA-Senar mantém ainda a faculdade CNA, que forma profissionais em graduação e pós-graduação para atuar na agricultura e na pecuária. Produzir alimentos de qualidade, gerar emprego e renda. Ao trabalhar pelo agro, o sistema CNA-Senar reafirma seu compromisso com o Brasil.
Bem, como vocês puderam ver, a CNA é o canal direto de acesso a milhões de produtores rurais brasileiros e sempre prezando pela qualidade da vida no campo e atendimento a critérios de sustentabilidade ambiental, econômica e social. Vamos falar agora diretamente sobre a rastreabilidade oficial brasileira, que é a Lei 12.097 de 2009, então, que ela prevê a obrigatoriedade na propriedade e nos animais do registro, né? Então, o registro de todas as propriedades rurais e a marcação dos animais para que tenha, então, essa ligação entre o rebanho e a propriedade. Essa marcação na lei de rastreabilidade é prevista como sendo a marca a fogo, mas ela pode ser substituída pela identificação por um chip eletrônico. Isso está previsto na lei. A rastreabilidade continua, então, entre propriedades ou entre uma propriedade e o frigorífico pela guia de trânsito animal. Então, o trânsito dos animais é registrado pela guia de trânsito animais e pela nota fiscal de venda daqueles animais que estão sendo transitados. E dentro da indústria, a lei de rastreabilidade prevê, então, a obrigatoriedade dos registros de inspeção sanitária do Serviço Oficial Brasileiro, assim como o registro do setor privado, das próprias indústrias frigoríficas, por meio das boas práticas de fabricação e todos os registros dos programas de controle, de autocontrole. Próximo, por favor. Next. Todos os registros realizados nos 27 estados brasileiros são enviados para uma base de dados única no Ministério da Agricultura. Essa base de dados única é chamada Plataforma de Gestão Agropecuária. E esses dados são utilizados para geração de mapas estratégicos relacionados a doenças, relacionados ao trânsito animal, para poder, então, ter a implantação, quando necessário, dos planos de contingência sanitária para os rebanhos animais. Next. Próximo. A rastreabilidade, a lei de rastreabilidade ainda prevê a possibilidade de atender de maneira oficial a requisitos específicos dos mercados compradores. Então, a gente pode, por meio dos protocolos de rastreabilidade privados, fazer, então, a garantia de diversos requisitos, como genética, o sistema produtivo, né, a alimentação dos animais, se o rebanho foi confinado ou se ele foi criado a pasto, questões relacionadas a bem-estar animal, a origem dos animais e também sustentabilidade. Importante ressaltar que essas informações adicionais, obrigatoriamente, devem ser acessadas mediante a autorização dos produtores. O produtor, então, ele faz a adesão ao protocolo que ele deseja participar. Isso é devido à Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados. Nenhuma informação adicional de produtores, seja guia de trânsito animal, GTA, né, ou mesmo quantidade de animais, ela é de acesso público. O produtor tem que permitir que essas informações sejam compartilhadas por meio de um protocolo de rastreabilidade. A única exceção que temos com relação ao acesso de informações de produtores rurais os programas de governo. Os programas de governo podem acessar a qualquer tempo as informações para realizar fiscalizações, auditorias e tem o poder de polícia para poder autuar produtores no caso de alguma não conformidade. Para fazer a gestão dos protocolos privados, a CNA desenvolveu o sistema AgriTrace. O AgriTrace, então, a gente faz o registro de todos os protocolos com suas regras e requisitos acordado entre as partes, para poder, então, fazer essa gestão e controle da informação, dando, então, organização e transparência para esses protocolos. Próximo. Então, os protocolos privados acessam as informações oficiais da plataforma de gestão agropecuária para poder, então, mediante autorização do produtor, acessar essas informações e fazer a gestão de cada protocolo. Hoje, nós temos, então, 12 protocolos privados aprovados, com mais de 22 mil fazendeiros aderidos, com 60 frigoríficos participantes desses protocolos e mais de 2 milhões de carcaças certificadas. Para as raças bovinas, nós temos os protocolos Angus, Hereford, Nelore, Charolais, Devon, Wagyu, Senepol, Brangus e Rúbia Galega. Esses são os protocolos de raças bovinas. Outros protocolos para alimentação dos animais, temos a PEC-BR, a pasto, e temos também o SISBOV, que é o Serviço de Rastreabilidade de Bovinos, serviço oficial do Ministério da Agricultura, que cumpre os requisitos para exportação de carne para a União Europeia, onde os animais têm que estar, então, 90 dias em área habilitada, são apenas 9 estados habilitados, e 40 dias na última propriedade, com 100% do rebanho identificado, para que possam ir para o abate, e para, então, produzir carne para a União Europeia. Tudo isso com a certificação de terceira parte. Próximo. Diferenças que a gente vê entre rastreabilidade coletiva e individual, basicamente, então, a gente consegue, pela rastreabilidade coletiva, ter garantia sanitária, garantia de origem, garantia genética dos animais e a garantia ambiental. No caso da rastreabilidade individual, nós conseguimos também todas essas garantias, mas temos ainda a vantagem com a rastreabilidade individual de ter aspectos zootécnicos, os indicadores zootécnicos de ganho de peso, de nascimento, data e tudo mais, para que possa, então, ser registrado. Alguns protocolos sanitários, alguns protocolos que aliam a questão sanitária e de meio ambiente, que nós já fazemos a gestão, são o protocolo Angus Sustentabilidade, o protocolo Carne Sustentável da BPO e o protocolo Carne Carbono Neutro, que é a integração lavoura, pecuária e floresta.
I'm sorry, Paulo, I'm going to have to just ask you to wrap up, please. Thank you.
Ok. Alguns aspectos que nós vemos como previsíveis, os requisitos, a evolução dos requisitos, expandir a área habilitada de exportação para a União Europeia, de exportação de carne para a União Europeia, já que somos reconhecidamente pela OIE como país livre de febre aftosa. Devemos considerar também as ações e os eixos, os programas do Plano ABC, que são 7 eixos que nós estamos dedicados e que trazem muito a questão da sustentabilidade, da questão do carbono, e assim a gente tem ótimos resultados. a estimulação da identificação individual dos animais para os produtores, para terem melhores resultados, melhor produtividade, e a gente tem também que fazer a expansão dos protocolos de rastreabilidade com critérios ambientais para que a gente possa mostrar tudo que a gente já realiza dentro do país. Muito obrigado. Esses são os contatos e a página da internet para acesso.
Thank you so much, Paula. That was great. I will just introduce our next speaker up, which is Simon Hall. Simon Hall is a senior manager at the National Wildlife Federation. He leads the organization's work in South America to decouple agricultural production from deforestation. He is also currently on the board of directors of GRSB and was the lead representative in our Responsible Leather Roundtable, and serves as a policy expert in the Emerging Markets Investor Alliance. And I just want to make a quick note that NWF has also been very involved and a very important partner for us in the work we did to develop our deforestation and conversion-free protocol. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Simon. I'll let you take on from here.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here with you all. It's a real pleasure, so thank you. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide, please, and give a quick. So I wanted to just start off by introducing the National Wildlife Federation to those of you who may not be familiar with us. I wanted to just lay out, the current situation in terms of traceability and some of the priorities that we see it. Some leadership that we've seen through our partners in the Indirect Supplier Working Group, or the GTFI. Talk a little bit about some of the innovation that we've been able to advance in terms of a new tool to help support traceability in the sector called VisiPec. And I wanted to just set out a few challenges and opportunities and some recommendations from our perspective for your all's consideration. Next slide, please. So NWF was established in 1936. So we are one of the oldest and largest and most trusted conservation organizations in the world. We have over 6 million members and supporters outside the US. A lot of our work has been in the US, but we've also been working outside of the US for over 30 years with local partners in the tropics and subtropics throughout South America, Western Africa, and Southeast Asia, really around some of the most important forest risk commodities. And our goal is to seek solutions that we can decouple the agricultural production and agricultural resilience away from the reliance on deforestation and land use kind of conversion practices to grow the base of agriculture. And so this is about sort of, trying to drive innovation, partnering with leading companies, and advancing thought leadership across sort of these different areas of focus. Let's go to the next slide here, please. So what's the current situation from our perspective? I think, it's probably doesn't come as much surprise to anybody, but cattle are one of the leading drivers of deforestation and conversion in Brazil. This basically makes it one of the top sustainability challenges facing the industry. Two biomes in particular in Brazil are sort of what we would consider to have elevated risk for buyers and investors and others associated with deforestation in the beef value chain. And that's really the Amazon biome and the Cerrado biome. There's other biomes outside of Brazil that do also have risk, but in this context, those are the two probably most important ones. While there are, of course, deforestation risks and sustainability challenges, there's what we see from both our work at a supply chain level, but also our work on the ground in these regions and through our partners, that there's many, many good ranchers that have invested in sustainable practices. They're really leaning in on these issues and trying to produce responsibly and not rely on deforestation and adopt sustainable practices like many of those that are outlined in the GTPS JIPs. So there's a lot of really great work happening here, but the overall area has this sort of risk profile associated with it. So how do we address that? How do we work towards a sort of solution there. And in our view, traceability is really the key. I guess you could even consider it to be kind of a golden key of sorts, because it provides the opportunity to identify the good responsible ranches, match those with the companies that are looking to source more responsibly, and kind of, make sense of the noise and confusion across the landscape, and sort of, how things move from point A to point B, and how you sort of assess risk, manage risk, and how do you drive improvements on the ground. And we think traceability is really one of the keys to open up a lot of those doors. And we think that there are real win-wins that are possible from sourcing from low-risk suppliers that are doing the right thing, even though they may be operating in a landscape of relatively higher risk. All things are relative in that sense, but traceability, I think, is something that can really help improve the situation, both from the producer, brand, company, customer, investor. It's really sort of across the board benefits as we see it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit about the importance of traceability, this very simplified schematic just sets out basically like three sort of phases of production. So in the cattle, there's basically the breeding phase, sort of this is the cow-calf sort of phase of things. Then there's sort of the rearing or backgrounding phase. And then there's the fattening or finishing phase, and then those animals get sort of processed through into the meat packer slaughterhouse facility, and then make their way on to the tanneries and for the leather. And so basically there are three fairly distinct phases of production, and different farms can specialize in different phases. Sometimes they can do all three phases, and they'd be a full cycle ranch, as indicated in the diagram by that bar at the bottom, where they do all three. Or it can be sort of disaggregated, where you have sort of some specialization in breeding or some specialization in fattening. Basically, all this means is that oftentimes the cow from its birth to slaughter moves between different ranches. And so it can be bought and sold and transferred, and it changes hands. And so oftentimes it can change hands several times, and sometimes, up to a dozen times. And so basically what this means is both the unique nature of livestock as animals. They can up and move to the farm or the municipality. There's possibility for them to move, unlike soy or palm oil. Those plantations don't up and walk to the field next door. And so there's this movement of animals that is part of the traceability challenge, about tracking that movement and identifying sort of where they're going and who they're going to between sort of space and time. And that's really at the heart of the traceability issue here. Let's go to the next slide. I'll try to pick it up so we don't run out of time. I think Paula did a great job of explaining the difference between sort of the individual level versus the batch level. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. In our view, SysMov is one good example of an individual level traceability that's specifically designed for the EU export market to fill the Hilton quota, as Paula was mentioning. And then there's this other sort of batch level kind of approach. And in our view, the Animal Transit Guide, or the GTA, and the Rural Environmental Registry, the CAR, which we heard a little bit about earlier, are really central to improving traceability at that batch level, kind of, raising the bar up across the board in Brazil for traceability. And then obviously the individual level represents additional benefits on the zootechnical sort of side of things that are also really interesting. And we can kind of both do both in parallel. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just a quick summary timeline about traceability, deforestation, cattle, and our work, and how all those things are colliding. We go back to 2009. We saw that some major meat packers in Brazil made commitments to zero deforestation in the Amazon. The subsequent years, we saw them implementing supply chain solutions, monitoring practices, risk management practices that are really focused on their direct suppliers. Up until following off of that, though, we didn't really see a lot of action happening on the indirect supplier component of things. So that's the breeding and sort of the rearing phases in our simplified model we saw earlier. This has led to sort of an ongoing source of deforestation, potentially undermining conservation impacts. It always remained as sort of a black spot, or like a gap on some of the audit reports and some of the verification that happened. Is just like, it's always in progress, incomplete. And so this continued to sort of represent ongoing risk in the marketplace. So in response to that, we worked with our local partners, ADT, to form a specific solution-oriented group called the GTFI, or the Indirect Supplier Working Group, to really focus on advancing solutions in this space of indirect supplier and deforestation. So we had, brought that group together. It's multi-stakeholder, includes NGOs, it includes the meat packers, retailers, brands, investors, international actors, Brazilian actors. We reviewed a lot of different options in terms of what would make the most sense from a traceability perspective, given the current context. And the industry within the GTFI really landed on GTA and CAR as being sort of the optimal solution to improve traceability in the near term. It's cost effective. GTA and CAR are already in use. They're scalable, they're rapidly deployable, and they don't pose any new costs or management burdens on ranchers to be used for traceability in the way that other types of traceability, like individual ear tagging would, which obviously has a cost associated with it, much of those costs borne by producers. So GTA and CAR was very attractive across many different criteria that were assessed. Subsequent years, NWF and our partners, both at the University of Wisconsin, our research partners, and ADT in Brazil, really answered this call and tried to overcome some of the, so we agreed GTA and CAR makes sense. That seems to be a viable way forward to improve traceability, but how do you do it? There's technical questions there. How would you operationalize bringing together these completely disparate data sets? How is it possible to operationalize a tool to be able to do that in an automated, scalable way that doesn't sort of have a huge cost for producers or for meat packers? And then how would you develop a set of decision-making rules to act on that information in a responsible way? And how can you do all of that together in a way that sort of makes sense and addresses the issues both on the conservation, the social, and on the environmental and the business side. So fast forward to kind of where we are in the last year and this year, we see that traceability has really emerged as a top priority, both for meat packers and for the larger value chain. We see that there's a lot of interest in tools like VisiPack and others that have emerged recently. We see that the GTFI, this Indirect Supplier Working Group, has come up with a starting point for decision-making rules or guidance that can be applied. And that's starting to take hold, and we're seeing companies starting to test that and put that into practice. And we see a lot of movement around transparency of information, and particularly how do we make the GTA more transparent in a way that also safeguards personal data privacy? How can we do both and address the concerns of the day? Let's go to the next slide, please. So just quickly, the Indirect Supplier Working Group, I already mentioned it, but it was formed in 2015 by our partners ADT. It's multi-stakeholder. Its real primary objectives are to develop solutions and to communicate the challenges and opportunities around this set of issues. I already mentioned the sort of consensus position on GTA and CAR and the sort of the combination of those being an optimal opportunity for improving traceability. And then we have these GTFI good practices, which helps provide some guidance around monitoring and how to do risk management. So let's go to the next slide, please, and we'll talk a little bit about VisiPack. So this is a tool that we developed with our partners to help visualize the cattle supply chains and improve traceability and strengthen deforestation monitoring. It was developed by the Gibbs Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a lot of local stakeholder consultation and a lot of feedback and sort of co-creation with industry as well. It really functions as an add-on traceability tool. So as I mentioned, the meat packers have good systems in place for monitoring their direct suppliers. So the question is always, how do we expand those to include the indirect suppliers that have basically been left out of a lot of the monitoring solutions and deforestation-free and sustainable sort of supply chains? So how do we bring them into those supply chains? And how do we sort of develop tools that can make that possible? And so that's what VisiPack is really meant to do. And with VisiPack, it's been sort of helped pave the way for other tools. And we see that sort of now really starting to generate a lot of interest in Brazil. Let's go to the next slide and we'll wrap up real quick here. I know I'm short on time. Okay, so as I mentioned, we see GTA and CAR as really as the best option forward right now. But the lack of GTA transparency and accessibility really for the industry itself is creating some obstacles and making it more challenging for the industry to move at a quicker pace. So they can achieve results much faster if they had access to this in the right way. there's always a little bit of confusion when we talk to folks about sort of how GTA and CAR can be used in a smart and safe way. We fully recognize the importance of safeguarding personal information under the LGPD law, which is basically Brazil's version of the European GDPR. That is extremely important. We believe that there are technical and just common sense ways that we can do both. And we're focused on this because we fear that the failure to improve traceability and manage risk both on deforestation and other sustainability issues will have major consequences for the industry in the near term. And this is a lose-lose scenario that we must do everything that we can to avoid. This has big implications for producers, rural livelihoods, and so we want to make sure that the market needs and market expectations can be met, and we think that they can, and it's just about sort of bringing those two worlds together. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just to summarize, and this is the last slide, and we'll be done soon. There are good actors in high-risk areas and bad actors in low-risk areas. Basically, traceability is the key to cutting through all of that noise. We see that there should be really a push for better traceability just across the board, both beef and leather value chains. We see GTA transparency as critical for this. One of the common sense ways is put the car number on the GTA, create a one-to-one link there. There's a lot of great ideas that we have there where we'd love to explore with others in a separate call offline. And then we also see that socio-environmental criteria could be added to SysBolv and other kind of individual systems. There's a lot of opportunities there as well. So with that, let me just pause and give back the rest of my time. There's a few links, my contact information. Love to follow up with you if you have any additional questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simon. And I am terribly sorry for all our speakers that had so much good information to share and very little time to share it with us. Our last speaker today is Kim. I'm just warning everyone, we might actually go a little over the hour to be able to answer your questions afterwards. So Kim is the Sustainability Manager at JBS Leather. His work focuses on eco-efficient solutions for the leather industry, from the optimization of processes to the evaluation of mechanisms to minimize the use of natural resources. He is also one of the people behind the Kind Leather product and JBS's 360 traceability platform. So Kim, I'll let you take on from here.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Well, first of all, I'd like to also thank GRSB, GTPS, and Textile Exchange, also NWF and CNA for sharing their knowledge today. It's a pleasure to be here. And next slide, please. So, well, first of all, I'd like to share within this presentation the way we see the challenges in cattle raising and leather traceability in Brazil, but also more importantly, our strategies. So our strategies are based on 4 tools. I'll be exploring each one of these here. So next slide, please. First of them being our supplier monitoring system. You can go forward, please. So the way we monitor, so far we started this monitoring of our direct suppliers since 2009. Some great news now, starting July 1st, we will expand our monitoring system to other biomes besides the legal Amazon and the Amazon biome. So we will also monitor the Cerrado biome, the Pantanal, Mata Atlântica, and Caatinga. So that this will mean within our supply chain, 77,000 farms being monitored, an area larger than 3 times the United Kingdom. This analysis actually monitors besides deforestation, also any potential farm that's linked with slave analogous labor or embargoed areas are also monitored daily with this system. And so far, we've already blocked 11,000 farms, but because they didn't comply to our sustainable sourcing criteria. So an independent audit runs annually to make sure that everything is going correct. And well, the last couple of them achieved 100% compliance. So this is actually a very mature system so far. Next slide, please. So then the second strategy is the Beef on Track program. Please, next slide. What it does, it is a hub that actually has all the set of tools and information and data and protocols necessary for any given meat packer or tannery or retailer, supermarket, anyone actually that wants to learn and to learn from whoever is mature at the monitoring systems and how they can engage in a deforestation-free supply chain. So it's, next slide, please. So it's, it was developed by the Public Prosecutor's Office in Brazil and the NGO Imaflora, which are both really engaged in also solving the deforestation, improving in the deforestation problem in Brazil. So they both are very engaged in this. And we, next slide, please. We are co-developers. So we are behind this protocol and will keep being sharing our knowledge and our experience in from the private sector perspective on how to monitor and engage with suppliers. Okay, next slide, please. And then here the strategy, the last two strategies, so the livestock transparency platform and the green offices. Please move on. Thanks. The way we approach here the suppliers of our suppliers, as shared by our other colleagues, is regarding traceability is our main challenge nowadays. So we did launch last year the livestock transparency platform, in Portuguese, Pecuária Transparente. We actually communicate a lot in Portuguese because this is all about engagement, right? Because as mentioned before by Simon, I mean, the main challenge here is accessibility to data. So the Brazilian GDPR, which is the LGPD, actually doesn't make it available for us to actually get access to any information from the producers without them authorizing. So the thing here is it's a 5-year plan where it's all about engagement. That's the main word behind it. So we started so far, the system is already up and running. So, and our goal within the first year, within this year, is to monitor 1 million heads of cattle within our supply chain from the suppliers of our suppliers. It runs on a blockchain technology, so we're using technology to help us to validate every information inserted to the system from the institutions who have access to this documentation. And in the end, there's the green offices, which is all about helping any supplier who has an issue to actually be able to comply to the PRID, which is the graded areas recovery plan. So if he wants to solve any environmental issue he might have, we'll have assistance and we'll have a consulting team to help them solve the environmental liabilities. Next slide, please. So this is how the website looks. So it's fully in Portuguese so far because it's all about engaging with local suppliers, but it's fully accessible through web browser or any phone. Next slide, please. I'll move fast here so we are on time, but I'd like to share a bit on how it really works because this is really important. So first of all, a given producer will register to the blockchain system. Next slide, please. Then he'll have, well, all his data, his personal data, but also his property ID number, because a given producer might have different farms, and we, of course, need to monitor them individually. Next slide, please. Here is like his screen, his platform, and how he sees. So that's his page where he'll see his own information, his personal data. Next slide, please. Then he'll see his properties, right? So if he has, in this example, he has only one, but if he had several, he would see every one of them and how it's registered. Next one, please. Then he'll see the modules. So far, and the most important one being the transparent livestock platform. That's the most important one here. But after we improve and recreate other solutions. He will also be able to choose between all of them within the same framework. Also here, he has all the information he needs. So what the system monitors. So, okay, so deforestation, embargoed areas, invasion of indigenous lands, a brief explanation of our social and environmental criteria. Also, the advantages of the system and how it works. He'll have the adhesion platform, because the whole point is the system will be voluntary, so we'll be advancing with the engagement of our supply chain until 2025. But after that, beginning January 1st, 2026, it will be mandatory. So anyone who wants to do business with JBS will have to adhere to this system, where we check all the information of the suppliers, of our suppliers. It's really important here, because here is where our supplier will register all the information of their supplier. So he has a platform where he can select and submit all that information. So we already have these apps available at Apple App Store and also at Google Play, where he can download the scanner for the documentation. So he downloads it, and in the next slide, we'll be able to see how he can scan the information, and this scanning will actually be able to read. It's already running, right? So it's reading the information of the documentation and uploading it to the platform. In here, it's how our supplier is able to see the information that's uploaded and the information of his suppliers, right? So all the data there. So he can choose to check, right? He can see the results. So here he will see if his suppliers are compliant or non-compliant to our sourcing criteria. And here he has two options mostly, right? He can, if he wants to keep selling to JBS after the cutoff date, he can, of course, exclude any non-compliant compliant supplier. But of course, he can opt for the different route, which is the most successful one for everyone, which is to engage with them. And then it's where the green offices come to place, and they can become compliant again by working on their environmental liability. So reforestation, for instance, being one of them, of the land they degraded before. So these green offices, they are already spread out. We have several of them already up and running within and outside of the Amazon biome. So again, the point is to offer environmental help for anyone who wants to bring their farm back to environmental compliance. And how this all connects to leather, right? I mean, every one of our hides is stamped with a traceability, a physical traceability stamp. So it carries the information of the slaughterhouse, the tannery, and the day of the week when the slaughter took place. It's located on both sides of the hide in case the hide the leather is divided. So in that case, it will always carry the traceability stamp. Next slide, please. And to wrap up everything, so we have this online platform which is open to everyone, where you can access, that's the URL, and you can type in the traceability stamp and actually trace your hides back to the farmers, the group of farms that supply them. So this is what I wanted to share. Thank you very much again for everyone that organized the event. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that. That was great. And very sorry. Thank you for the audience that stick along with us these few extra minutes. So I believe the questions and answers have actually, that were asked during the webinar have actually been answered. But and I think so we'll just wrap up here, because I know everyone is very busy. But if you do have any questions, do not hesitate. Please reach out to us at Textile Exchange, and we'll ensure that any questions you have are answered, and also put you in touch with any of the speakers if needed. So on that, I would just like to really thank all our speakers today. Thank you for the great content you shared today. The recordings and presentations will be made available to everyone. Anyone that registered for this webinar will receive some communications with a link to the recordings. Thank you again to our great interpreter, Marcel, who's been with us and has done a great job at translating. So thank you again to everyone, and I'll let just Rose wrap up before we close down this webinar.
Again, thank you to our speakers, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. Again, as a friendly reminder, this presentation, along with the links to today's slide presentation as well, will be sent to all those who have registered for today's webinar. That concludes our webinar. Thank you. Goodbye.